Okay, guys, this is module two. Module two, we're getting into. This is where we start to dig in, and we're starting to look at really who we are as people. And to me, that's really a key place that we've got to do our work. We can look at other people and how they're successful, but if you really start to dig in, you'll find out a lot about their success has to do about how they think. And I'm going to kind of hammer away at that point throughout this course because it is the key to success. You know, you can have a lot of opportunity, and even people who get that can kind of sabotage it because they're not thinking this through with the right perspective or the right understanding, or they've got improper programming that's come from their youth, from childhood, that was painful. Some things have happened that have been pretty hard to deal with or go through. School can be gnarly, you know. I hated high school, and grade school was rough. I didn't really, seemed like didn't fit in real good. I was kind of a creative, quiet kid. Probably have a little bit of the Asperger thing in my personality too, if you understand what that's all about. But and as I discussed in the introduction there, in module one also, we're breaking this down into pilot training and then taking off and flying. So there's learning how to fly at the plane of our life, if you will, the aircraft, and you could call it, any number of things, the ship, as it were, as well. Before we take off and try to fly around and do our thing, it'd be a good idea to really understand what it is that goes into that process in terms of being a pilot. So we got to know how the gears work, how the dials on the aircraft and the cockpit, what are they telling us? What's the feedback, the information, the data that's coming at us, and how to interpret that stuff? You know, how does it work? You know, I don't know how an airplane works, but I know there's engines and there's landing gear and there's wings and vertical stabilizers and all this stuff. And so you got to know what you're doing to take off in an airplane. That is for sure. And so with the analogy again being, we're the pilots of our own lives, our own ships, our own aircraft, our own futures. We really got to break it down. So in section 2, we're going to be looking at who's in charge. So who's telling us what to do? Is it the little voices that have been sort of put in there and planted in us by both ourselves and others over the years and maybe even decades? That's a big part of how I think a lot of us end up. There's a lot of programming, a lot of feedback we've gotten from the world that both either supports or does not support us as we move forward in life. And a lot of it can be beating us up internally and stuff. So we're going to look at who's in charge. Pilot assessment, we break down sort of some of that baggage, if you will, or internal programming. We'll talk about that. Sort of where are we at right now? What are the things that are hard for us to do? Are we risk averse or are we risk tolerant? Are we risk takers? Because growing and learning and doing things always requires some risk and discomfort. We have to step out of our comfort zone, and that's not easy for a lot of us to do. One thing I've sort of always tried to live by, if it's something that I'm uncomfortable doing, and of course these are not dangerous things, although I have done hang gliding and some skydiving as well. But it's like, how do we push back the fears and we get out there and we take risks? So we're going to be looking at that process of assessing who we are at this point right now today. And then we're also going to be looking at what is the stuff that we're chewing on every day. And I use the analogy of an apple a day keeps the doctor away. So what kind of apples, that is, information are we consuming? Are we allowing into our minds and hearts? What are we watching on our little phones or on our computers? Is it edifying us? Is it empowering us? Is it just hypnotizing us? And we're allowing hours go by each day, and we're not getting stuff done that we could do and maybe should do, again, to get us to where we want to go. And do we even know where we want to go? Where do I want to go? I just want to sit here and sort of tread water and hang out where I'm at, not really go anywhere. Am I too comfortable? These kind of things where we start to look at ourselves very closely will help us. Again, if you don't want to end up doing what you want to do for a living, and you don't want to do things that you love to do, and you don't want to take risks, well, you're kind of going to be right where you're at. And that's okay too, I guess. But it's important for us to understand we don't have to stay where we're at, especially if it's an unpleasant situation. So there's ways of thinking that will help us transition into different things. And that doesn't mean life doesn't hit us with some pretty gnarly blows to the gut, you might say. There's people that have jumped into a swimming pool, broken their neck, and become paralyzed. Johnny Erickson Tata famous woman who was a great swimmer, a great athlete, but she broke her neck, and she now has been a great pastor and teacher in Christianity, and she's made a life that's glorious and amazing, even though she's a quadriplegic. So there's extremely gnarly, harsh, horrible things that can be turned into things that are a blessing to others and that are an inspiration to others too. And so I really want to try to do that myself as I'm in my latter years. I want to try and make a difference that's positive. Didn't always do that when I was younger. A lot of times I was more focused in my own adventures, my own entertainment and pleasure seeking, which is all too common when we're young, I suppose. But that's going to be something we need to really consider and look at. So we're looking at what kind of stuff that's coming into our minds. And then we get to chapter 4, again, module 2. And again, we're pilot training. What kind of voices do we hear in our minds? What kind of feedback do we get from ourselves? And those little voices in our head that just whisper things. There's a lot of that kind of negative self-talk that gets sort of programmed in, unfortunately, too often with all of us. I can certainly vouch for that in my journey. A lot of self-hatred, almost guilt, shame, insecurities. I'll never do it. You can't ever do that. You're no good. All that kind of self-talk. So those voices we want to look at in this module number 2. So who's in charge here? Who are you at? Where are you at right now? Pilot assessment. An apple a day. What are you putting into your noggin? Visually, auditorily, people you're around. What are they talking to you about? What kind of people are you around? I've heard it said that you're the sum total of 5 of your dearest friends around you. So you might want to consider what kind of friends you're hanging out with too. What are you reading? Are you reading inspirational content? Or are you just sitting there zombieing out with the remote control on the couch? You know, it's so easy to do. I'm guilty of it too. But a little bit of that's okay, I suppose, but really want to keep track of that. So let's work through the section pilot here. We talk a lot about the process, like who's running the show right now. You can read that through the course materials here. Download the PDF, and then look at the things I talk about. You know, when you do a little bit of sales, there's things that you can use that help in making things happen, and that is just a couple of things. We talk about mirroring and talking to the customer or the prospect, people who may become a customer, about them. It's not always about us. A lot of times we slip into talking about us a little bit too much. You want to be sensitive to the people you're around. So, and that builds trust. So that's who's in charge, continued communication and trust building. You want to build that trust with your people and vendors, customers for sure, prospects who may be customers, vendors, people you work with in whatever industry or capacity that you will be working in, to again provide a thing, object, or service for others that you can bless them with. It'll be worth it for them to pay you money. It's an amazing thing, and I'll just mention this. I don't know if it's in the course curricula here, but it's a weird thing, understanding value, because you hear the stories of, you know, the doctor comes and he sees you for 5 minutes and he pokes around and he does some little tests, and then he charges you, you know, $4,000. And you're like, $4,000? You were with me for 10 minutes. And the truth is, no, actually, that doctor spent years, maybe decades, spent thousands of dollars to learn where to look, what to look for with your health situation, and how to test it, how to assess it, how to eliminate all the possibilities that might cause that symptom, to get to where they can, in 5 or 10 minutes or an hour, diagnose and give you some great feedback that will save your life even. And you'll read in my story that I've been involved in the health situation context for many, many years, being a dialysis patient and now a kidney transplant recipient 2 times now. So it's a pretty interesting thing. But when it comes to your thing or product, understanding how much you're worth is also a part of the challenge, because I tended to devalue myself. I would undercharge, and for a long time I did that. I'm finally being more confident and comfortable telling people what I think I'm worth. And of course the market will bear what it'll bear, you know, supply and demand. If there's a lot of people doing what you do, that will most likely drive the pricing structures, the price points of what you are providing down, because they can choose and pick, and there's a lot more competition. So if you get really good at what a lot of people do, you may be able to elevate yourself up above the crop, as it were, and be able to get good money for what you do. But it's more competitive and it's more of a challenge, but you can do it. You can do it, but you've got to be smart and you've got to come up with improvements on the value that your clients or customers will receive. You know, why would they buy your thing or ask for you to provide that service if you're a wedding photographer, say, let's say, than someone else? So there's some keys that I talk about here in the course too that has to do with our personalities, because I've had people hire me and go, you were the most expensive, but I liked you. I just got the feeling I could trust you. So that gets to the superpowers that we talk about here in this course. So so that was something I'm throwing out there as I'm talking to you in this video here. We also talk about the 100% rule. I heard this many, many years ago in a course I was taking. Again, I've been taking courses, seminars, trainings, talk to counselors. You know, we do what you got to do to get yourself improved, to get yourself over some of these mental hurdles that are in the way of our progress. And one of them was the 100% rule. And that's mentioned here in chapter 1 of the section that we're starting in here. So you're 100% responsible for your thoughts, feelings, and actions. And so that's a pretty sobering thought. A lot of times we can end up feeling like we're at the mercy of everybody else, life circumstances, natural disasters, whatever it might be, but that we are utterly have no control. Well, in fact, we have control over how we respond to what happens to us in life. Okay, you know, I find out my kidneys are failing, so I'm gonna have to go on dialysis. Well, okay, how am I gonna deal with that? Well, I can be grumpy, I can be upset, I can be moody, I can be, it's not fair, why are you doing this, God? I can think all those thoughts, and we're allowed in my mind to do this for a moment or two. I think in my mention here, it's like the 5-minute rule. So stuff happens to us, we react emotionally. I get that. Okay, that's totally fair and legit. But we don't want to live in that reactive state, emotionally reactive state, for too long. And each of us will define what that means. But if we're still hurting and still reacting from something that happened 6 months or a year ago, then maybe we have gotten into a little bit of a ditch on the side of the road and we're kind of stuck. We're holding on to something. We're kind of stuck in our stinking thinking is one of the phrases you might hear. I might have heard before. And so we want to be able to move past that. So again, it gets back to the 100% rule. We're 100% responsible for our thoughts, feelings, and actions. Excuse me. So we remember that, we start logging into that, we start realizing that. Now we start to take back control. And now we're starting to become the leaders of our band, the authors of our book, the pilot of our aircraft, if you will. We are now directing our lives, and it's not being directed by others. So there's a mini poster on that. There's a pilot assessment questionnaire worksheet that you can do. Check that out. Give it a thorough thinking through and fill out what you can, do what you can, and start to ponder what these questions ask of you. I'll do a second video. I'll do another video here on the journey, and this is something I want to demonstrate too. So let's just cut it off right there as the beginning of our chapter 2 portion of this module, and I will set up another one. So do the worksheets there that you see there, and then I'll talk about pilot assessment in more detail in the next video. All right.